Back in 1984, before The Matrix, before Speed, before anyone in Hollywood knew his name, Keanu Reeves was just another hopeful face in a sea of aspiring actors. He was lanky, reserved, and carried a spiral notebook everywhere he went, scribbled with thoughts, dialogue snippets, and philosophical musings. Some people thought it was charming. Most thought it was odd. At a community theater program in Los Angeles, where young actors paid to be seen, the atmosphere was thick with competition and ego. Everyone was trying to outcharm, out-network, and outshine everyone else. Except Keanu. He sat in the back row, head down, barely speaking unless called upon. His acting style was different. He wasn't loud or overly expressive. He didn't try to impress. To the instructors, he was intriguing. But to many classmates, he was that weird guy. And then there was her, Jessica. Blonde, confident, 23, with an agent already and a loud laugh that made heads turn. She wasn't cruel, just practical. She was there to climb the ladder, make connections, and maybe land a role on one of the dozens of new TV shows filming nearby. Keanu noticed her, of course. Everyone did. But unlike the other guys, he didn't flirt. He watched, listened, sometimes smiled from afar. And once, after a scene where they were partnered randomly, he mustered up the courage. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "Would you want to get coffee sometime? Just talk." Jessica blinked. There was a pause, a little too long. Then a smile. Not the kind you give when you're flattered. The kind you give when you're trying not to embarrass someone. "Oh, Keanu," she said with a soft chuckle. "You're sweet. But I'm kind of seeing someone. And honestly, you're just not really my type." He nodded, said totally fair, and didn't bring it up again. But others heard. Whispers started. "Keanu asked Jessica out? Seriously, that dude writes poems in a notebook and talks like he's in a dream." She didn't mean to humiliate him, but it stuck. After that day, Keanu withdrew even more. He still came to class, still did the work, still jotted endlessly in his notebook. But the few who'd spoken to him noticed the shift. His quiet confidence, already subtle, dimmed further. Not because of heartbreak, he was used to rejection, but because Jessica's polite dismissal had been overheard, amplified, and turned into a joke that followed him everywhere. By the end of the year, most of the students had either moved on or given up. A few landed commercials. Jessica booked a small recurring role in a daytime soap. Keanu. He just disappeared. No goodbye, no announcement. One week he was there, reading lines from Macbeth with that distant look in his eyes. The next, his seat in the back row was empty. Years passed. Jessica worked. She wasn't famous, but she was getting steady gigs, bit parts on shows, a commercial or two, and even a speaking role in a made-for-TV movie. She went on dates with producers, had her share of awkward auditions, and slowly began to understand that making it in Hollywood was less about talent and more about timing, luck, and knowing the right people. And then, one day, she turned on her TV and saw him. She didn't recognize him at first. The hair was longer, the voice deeper, but there was something in the eyes. The movie was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Silly, lighthearted, and nowhere near the Oscar-worthy drama she'd trained for. But the guy playing Ted? That was Keanu. Her jaw dropped. She watched the credits roll. Keanu Reeves. No mistaking it. That same quiet guy with the notebook. That same awkward voice now commanding the screen, with absurd charm. She laughed. "Good for him," she muttered, almost incredulously. He actually pulled it off. Still, she assumed it would be a one-time fluke. Hollywood was full of one-hit wonders. But she was wrong. Within a few years, Keanu was everywhere. Point Break, Speed, The Devil's Advocate. He wasn't just successful. He was a star. Jessica's career, meanwhile, plateaued. She worked consistently, but the spotlight never found her the way it did him. And quietly, a thought started to eat at her. What if I hadn't laughed? What if I'd said yes? By the early 2000s, Keanu Reeves wasn't just a star. He was a phenomenon. The Matrix had turned him into a global icon. Red carpets, award shows, fan hysteria. He had it all. But more than fame, something else about him caught people's attention. He didn't change. Despite the success, Keanu remained humble. He rode the subway. He gave millions to crew members quietly. He lived simply. No scandals, no ego, no entourage. That quiet guy from the back row. He'd grown into the kind of man the world desperately admired. Jessica saw the headlines like everyone else. But unlike everyone else, she remembered the original version. The Keanu who nervously asked her to coffee with a shaky smile. It stung. Not because she wanted his fame, but because she had once judged someone purely on presentation. She hadn't looked closer, hadn't seen the substance. And then, one day, the universe gave her a second chance. It was 2013. Jessica, now in her early 50s, had pivoted to coaching young actors. She still picked up occasional work on camera, but mostly taught workshops. That summer, she was invited to attend a private industry mixer hosted by a director friend. Just a quiet gathering of professionals, no media. She almost didn't go. She was tired, and mixers usually felt like high school with cocktails. But something pulled her there. And sure enough, halfway through the evening, a familiar figure entered the room. Not flashy, not surrounded by people. Just there. Keanu. He was older now. So was she. But those same eyes. That same stillness. Her heart raced. For 20 minutes, she debated. Should I say something? Would he remember me? Does he hate me? Finally, she approached. Hi, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I doubt you remember me. But we were in an acting class together. Back in L.A. A long time ago. He looked at her for a moment, then smiled. Jessica, right? She nearly gasped. You remember? Of course, he said. You were the only one who could cry on cue. She laughed, partly out of disbelief, partly to stop herself from tearing up. They talked, not about what could have been, but about what was. Acting, teaching, life. He asked questions, listened intently, and made her feel, for the first time in years, like she mattered. She never mentioned the coffee. She didn't need to. After that night, Jessica didn't expect to see Keanu again. He was Keanu Reeves, global star, internet darling, humble legend. She was just someone from his past. But a week later, she received a message through her agent. Keanu was working on a small indie film. No studios, no fanfare. Just something personal. He remembered her work and wanted to know if she'd be open to reading for a supporting role. She was stunned. It wasn't a huge part. She played a kind woman who gives the main character shelter for a night. Just 3 scenes. But it was the most honest, human dialogue she'd ever read. When she stepped on set, he greeted her like an old friend, introduced her to the director, stayed to watch her shoot even though he wasn't in the scene. During a break, she finally said it. I just want to say I was wrong about you back then. I didn't see you clearly. He shrugged gently. A lot of people didn't. But that's okay. I barely saw myself back then. It wasn't forgiveness, because he hadn't held a grudge. It was something better. A quiet understanding. An acknowledgement of who they'd been and who they were now. The film premiered at a small festival. It didn't go viral. It didn't win awards. But it was beautiful. Jessica didn't become a household name. She didn't get swept into a whirlwind of red carpets and stardom. But that role led to others. Smaller films. Passion projects. And most importantly, peace. She had once laughed at the quiet guy in the back row. And now, he'd given her more grace than she'd ever earned. The world would remember Keanu Reeves for many things, his roles, his kindness, his unshakable humility. But for one woman, he'd always be the man who offered coffee, got laughed off, and still chose kindness.